Buddy, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the music. I mean, that's why I put it on, because I enjoy it. Anyway, here we have our final replay of the day on Pripyat Winter. Pripyat River in Winter would be the best way to describe this map. We have on the right hand corner Lichtbringer in the German quarter, playing in the blue. The Russian side we have in the red Vivisektor, both German sounding names here, so could be an interesting battle. Cons coming onto the field for the Russians as the Germans build their first building and will bring in grenadiers. Their rally point is set to the north there, so I imagine they're both going to push to the north area, and we'll see how it goes. Russians have already captured their first sector and moving on to their second with the cons as the pioneers or the engineers move north. Now while this is all going on, this is all interesting and all that sort of stuff, but I shaved my head today again, and with the amount of warmth that is around, because obviously it's summer, I'm really loving it. It's given me a nice little airy head. And I said airy and not hairy because it's not hairy anymore. A little bit of an anecdote there for you, which was completely pointless and useless. Anyway, engineers retreated here. They will probably build their first building. That's the only reason why I can understand why they would retreat out. Cons on the field. And yes, I was right. Special Rifle Command coming in. I'd imagine scout cars, sniper to begin with, or sniper or scout car engineer with flame upgrade. That is the choices here to build this first building. HMG unit on the field. That'll look like to go middle, I'd imagine. It's got a decent cover system to be able to use to cover these areas quite nicely. The Germans are focusing on the north side of the map rather than the south side, which is a wise decision because the north is obviously closer than the south side. Another set of grenadiers coming in as well. As the first star goes down for the Russians. Let's just have a quick look at what's coming out. Scout car is coming out for the Russians. And I can only imagine that they're going to get their flame upgrade, those engineers, and we'll see an engineer flame scout car rush deal. As an URA is used by those cons, and those cons may be able to put a Molotov or something down, but unfortunately they were pinned, which will give them, the MG, a few seconds to turn round and absolutely murder those infantry, and those infantry will run away, which is very understandable. North Star is going down for the Germans, and they'll also push further to the south as the map is evening out. I can't speak properly. Evening out. Evening out. You see, with words in the English language, if you say them over and over again, they sound different every time you say them. So me saying evening out, it makes it sound like I'm going out for the evening. You know what I mean? Rather than it is evening out. Shut up, Briggs. Anyway. Completely pointless as the scout car with the flame upgrade here, well, the engineers with the flame upgrade, is doing some serious damage against this HMG squad, which I thought was going to what was going to happen, and I am proved correct in my assumptions, which is always nice to say. A bit of damage coming down for the scout car, but in essence they've done the job that they were set to do, and they completely destroyed that HMG unit, which obviously loses the Germans some manpower there. As the scout car takes a nice hit there from the Grenadier Panzerfaust, and it may not get away with this if the Grenadiers can get their Panzerfaust ability to replenish, which is it slowly is. Few more seconds, another Grenadier unit will come in and use their Panzerfaust, and I'm assuming that this scout car may be very dead in a second. Yes, there we go. Engineers will, I'm almost certain, will have to retreat out of this. Well, they're doing a very decent job here. The Grenadiers are going to retreat first, and the other Grenadier unit, which just got the MG upgrade, may have to also retreat out here if they are not careful. What's happening? The engineer may lose the engineer here. No, they're going to retreat out. Very wise decision there, as the Germans finally get their first command point on the field and are now going to be engaged by this scout car, which is always nice to have as a backup here in the middle. Grenadiers will retreat out of that. So we're even Steven at the moment. 1 star rates, 1 neutral, and the doctrine comes down. The mortar artillery kind of, hey, let's drop as much ordnance on top of you doctrine comes into play. Rifle, is that rifles or is it Scott? It's cons. Cons into the scout car there. Yeah, I think it is. And it's quite lulling action here. The Grenadier is going to take the 2nd star for the Germans. The Russians are going to push to the north and take their ammunition point from the Germans as well. And we're very even at the moment. I mean, the Grenadiers will do a little bit of damage if they can to this scout car, but I think the shock troops here, which have just come in for the Russians, they will do and push back these Grenadiers. The Grenadiers need to push forward here with whatever they've got left as they build their 2nd building to bring in Panzer Grenadiers and or half-tracks, or both. As a blizzard finally makes its way into the first of the map for this battle. Grenadiers are now in force in the middle here, and they may want to start to push towards this middle watchtower. This watchtower is almost always fought upon in this on this map because it offers a really good wide range of sight for the map, which means if you bring mortars in, as a little bit of lag hits my game, which is unfortunate, always seems to happen once or twice in a game, it stops and goes away. The fight continues here as the shock troops are now in the scout vehicle. As the scout vehicle takes even more damage, you might want to get those shock troops out, as they do. And the Grenadiers are doing a very decent job here of fighting the enemy, but a grenade goes down and that Grenadier squad nearly gets wiped out. The 2nd Grenadier squad is going to run away, and the 3rd Grenadier squad is going to run away. So, although the scout car goes down, which is a little bit of a loss for the Russians will be quite pleased with that, and they will obviously be in a nice little situation as a scout car comes in for the Germans. They will engage the shock troops, or they won't, because they can't see them because of the blizzard. Now they do, they'll engage the shock troops, but the shock troops will get into a little bit of cover and put some fire down on this scout car. I can imagine that the trade of fire here is going to be one-sided for the scout car, as cons now look to engage the scout car as well. They'll stick an AT grenade, I'd imagine, on top of this if they can reach, as they do. The scout car takes a little bit of damage, and the HMG unit has come up pretty much out of the blue there. I didn't see that HMG unit until it was on top of the infantry. So, the Russians are starting to take more and more of the field. The north side is being captured by these con squads who look bloody cold next, even though they're next to that fire. Nice little animation there. I do love this game. We have the scout car with the cons in it doing a little bit of damage to the infantry surrounding them, but this con car, I don't know, I just made that up, is going to probably go down in a second if it's not careful. As it does, both of the scout cars go down and the cons will retreat out. At the moment though, we have a lockout for the Russians. The Russians are in control of all 3 points, all 3 stars should I say, and it's looking quite nicely for the Russians here. Lichtbringer is bringing some of his infantry in to start to lock down this section. The sector as a scout car comes into play with the engineers and Flame inside. flame car, we'll call it. Grenadiers are going to push though. The 3 sets of Grenadiers are going to push to see if they can take out this scout car, or this flame car as I just dubbed it and then forgot to call it. But a grenade comes down from the shock troops, there's a little bit of damage. Pioneers are engaging, and the shock troops are going to have to run away from that, which is strange considering they had six of their men still up, so weird. Battle phase 2 comes down for the Germans, and they will look to think about bringing in some Panzer IVs very soon, as the Grenadiers try to engage this flame car, and it does a little bit of damage, but I mean they may come back in here and do a little bit more, but these scout cars are very, very weak when it comes to anything with something that, you know, MG42 like. So Pioneers take a little bit of damage from the shock troops there. HMG though is in a decent position, and that will start to cut down those shock troops. Suppression is in effect, and I'm assuming that pinned in effect will take effect. When I say effect any more times in that sentence, probably not. Then I might sound like a bit more of an idiot. Anyway, pinned are those shock troops, Yoda mode enabled, and the Panzer Grenadiers at the north here are going to take back some of their points, but in all honesty, the Russians have a lot of the field at the moment, and I mean the Germans do have the 2 stars though, which kind of, I mean, as I said in the last replay, the points on the board, I'd rather have the resources than the points at this early stage of a battle. You really want the resources so you can build up your army and then push forward when it comes crunch time, which is normally when you realise that you've got very little points left. The Germans though capture the 2 stars. They will take their sectors back that they should be controlling technically, if you want to divide this map in half. If you want to divide the map in half, you'd think that the Germans would have the advantage because they've got 2 of the stars, but this North Star usually is the one that is forgotten about the most, and it's normally this East Star here that I've noticed is usually under fire the most, as the watchtower here is being taken by the Germans, or the Russians, sorry, as shock and con squads are engaged by this HMG here. Pins down the first squad, that they're going to be flanked from the south by the con squad and the shock troops here. And if they're not careful, they may get a nice little Molotov or some kind of grenade put down on them, but they're not going to waste the ammunition, and they'll force them to retreat as the Grenadiers come into play here with their MG42s. Scout car coming through. May take some serious damage there, but the Grenadiers will do enough job and retreat out and destroy the scout car. Molotov does come down. And I realise that I'm kind of melding my sentences into like one big paragraph. So Molotov does a little bit of damage to both sides, and it looks like we have a little bit of a stalemate going on as the points are finally recaptured for the Germans, and this North Star is going to go down though for the Russians. It would seem, sorry I just mashed my microphone, it would seem if the Russians have control of these 3 points here, the Germans seem to control the stars. When it's the other way around, when the Germans control these 3 points at the top, the Russians will have the stars, because it's all about the momentum and the manoeuvrability of your army. If you use infantry units to take the points at the top, you will neglect the points in the middle, and you can't have it both ways, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, at the moment we have Ostwind coming onto the field. The first Ostwind that I've seen in these 1v1s. This Ostwind is my favourite vehicle in the whole game. Take out anything the Russians, take out anything of the Germans, this is the best vehicle as far as I'm concerned, because of 2 reasons. It does really good damage against infantry, and it does really good damage against light vehicles, especially at this early stage when the Russians haven't actually got anything on the field other than light vehicles and infantry. I can't think of a better vehicle to have on the field than this Ostwind right this second. It also does good against AA, against aircraft, so it's like a 3-pronged vehicle that does fantastic, especially when it gets its veterancy stars. So The start of the swap between the resources and the points is beginning again, with the resources being taken from the Germans to the Russians. It's the shock troops here. But the Ostwind may have something to say about that and will come in and do a little bit of damage, as we have another blizzard coming into effect, and the blizzard number 2. Ostwind literally comes in and says, "Hey infantry, you want some fire?" And the infantry say no, and the Ostwind says, "Tough, here is some fire. Goodbye," and the retreat, as does the cons in the middle. Panzer Grenadiers doing some good pushing here and will take this middle point. So, first star is taken. Resources not been utilised enough here for the Russians, as they finally bring in something. And we have another difference of opinion here. I thought they may want to bring in something other than what is being brought onto the field, which is the Su-76. Now, the Su-76 has a nice little ability that it can turn itself into an artillery piece and then turn itself back into some kind of light anti-tank weapon. But as an artillery piece, it does devastating attacks on these kind of locations, which I would imagine that it will set up straight away and launch a nice little barrage on this middle sector. That's what I personally would do with it. Ostwind, though, can take those Su-76s out, 75, 76, 76. And it may be quite an interesting battle here, because instead of going Panzer IVs and T-34s, we have a different strategy here from both sides. They've decided to go Ostwind, which is, personally, as I just said, my favourite vehicle in the whole game, against Su-76s, which is another different strategy for the Russians here. Ostwind does a really good job, but it's taking a little bit of fire from the Su-76. The Su-76 is focusing purely on the side of that Ostwind. It does a little bit of damage, but not, as I kept saying, it's light. But this Ostwind will take out the scout vehicle, but it could be in some serious peril here if that 76 can get into a position where it can hit it in its bum hole. And it's exactly what the Su-76 is doing. And unfortunately, I thought the Ostwind did a little bit of damage to the Su-76, but it looks like the 76 is going to do all the damage it needs to do and destroy the Ostwind completely. The HMG is doing some serious anti-tank, anti-piercing, armour-piercing rounds, and will destroy that Su-76. So, we have a trade here of the Ostwind and the 76, and all because this HMG unit didn't want to bloody die, which is absolutely fair enough. As Panzer Grenadiers coming to engage these shock troops. In all honesty, that trade there, I think, worked better for the Russians because it took out the Ostwind. I think if you look at the resources it took to bring in the Ostwind, 320 manpower and 115 fuel, and if we look at the Russians, it cost 160 manpower and 55 fuel. So in all honesty, the Germans had a lot of resources taken out in that move. Whereas the Su-76, not really that heavy in resources, probably about half the resources of the Ostwind. So that was a good trade, I think, for the Russians. But the Germans have regained some of their territory, and they're in a decent position here to start building up their forces. They have 2 of the stars. They have around about half of the territory, which is always nice to see. But unfortunately, they're in a bit of a position here. And finally, though, they bring a Panzer IV out, and this might be an interesting move here for the Germans, because at the moment the Russians have nothing they can do to deal with this Panzer IV, so this could be very well utilised. I also noticed that the command points have got enough now for the Germans to bring in artillery pieces if they so wish, which could be very useful against this amount of infantry. As a little bit of an engagement here is taking place between Grenadiers and 3 infantry squads, plus another shock troops, more scout cars. But this Panzer IV is going to say, "Hey-oh," and the scout car is going to be dead-oh. Apologies for that pathetic attempt at humour, as Panzer Grenadiers will engage on these infantry units, as an HMG unit also comes into play. But we've got, I think it's a plane or it's some kind of artillery coming down, I think, for the Russians. Oh, it's incendiary, and that will do serious amounts of damage to the infantry squads. Nothing, though, damage-wise to the Panzer IV. The HMG, though, is going to be in position to cover at least some of this area while the flame dissipates from the incendiary device as this east star goes down. A little bit of a southern push here for some of the infantry of the Germans. There's a really good job here of taking some of these points, getting some more resources on the board, which is always useful for the Germans because a lot of their stuff is required more resources than the Russian stuff, it would seem, as the Panzer IV slowly moves back into the fight. Not very useful though if it doesn't have infantry next to it. I mean, yes, it'll do some serious amounts of damage and it'll take out a lot of stuff, but if it doesn't have the infantry to back it up, then it could take some serious damage from infantry and armour grenades, which is what these shock troops may be able to put down on top of these vehicle. Infantry move in though and are going to neutralise this east star as the grenadiers move in. Panzer IV has literally gone straight through 2 bouts of infantry, mowed many of them down, helping out taking the other set. And another incendiary device drops on top of 2 infantry units, and those infantry units are going to die. Literally, if there is a place which could be called hell, that would be it. As 1 infantry HMG unit goes down and a grenadier unit almost gets completely destroyed as I receive an email. Nothing important. Anyway, I shouldn't really check my emails when doing this because that would be a silly thing for me to do. But nonetheless, we have an Su-85 on the field for the Russians. And although it looks like we're slowly getting to the end of this replay, the Russians are slowly being pushed back by the Germans. And I think it may be a little bit strange that that vehicle's gone all the way back there. But nonetheless, the utilisation of those incendiary devices has kind of stemmed the flow at the moment of the German advances. But the Germans are going to slowly move forward again as another pioneer squad comes into play. Probably to do a little bit of repair work on this vehicle. Panzer Grenadiers are going to have a little rest by that building and get next to some of this points that need to be controlled. The points are flowing for the Germans, unfortunately, but at the moment, like I said before, these points are not only really a time scale. They only warrant how much time you've got left, because if you can push the enemy further and further back as the map goes along, the mission battle goes along, then you can do some. You don't really need to worry too much about these points just yet. Although the Germans are going to move in with their Panzer Grenadiers and do a little bit of damage. They may want to think about getting those Panzerschreck upgrades, especially with the fact that they've now been fired upon by an Su-85, and they will have seen that Su-85. Veterancy comes in for the Grenadiers as they take a little bit of damage from that grenade from the shock troops. And unfortunately, not much is going to be done to these Grenadiers as shock cons take this middle ground. So another set of Grenadiers come in to try and fight against this onslaught. The tank is slowly moving up as a little bit of a fight at the bottom here between a scout vehicle and Grenadiers is pushed away. And tank is going to sit and do nothing just yet and just let the infantry get absolutely murdered here. And although these Panzer Grenadiers are doing a very decent job of really hurting these infantry as an incendiary device goes down again, but unfortunately for the Russians that was a waste of resources because it didn't get anything at all as the Su-85 does a little bit of damage towards this middle section here. One set of Panzer Grenadiers is going to run away. Molotovs go down for the cons, but the cons have just missed, I would say, the Panzer Grenadiers. The Panzer Grenadiers will now take this point back from the Germans, but this from the Russians. This Panzer IV here is doing nothing at the moment, and unfortunately the Su-85 is doing a little bit of damage, but this Panzer IV needs to flank rather than head on here. and it's going to wait for its partner in crime, the other Panzer IV, that now comes into play. And imagine they will want to flank around the side, maybe go down across this bridge and then round like that. Might do some serious damage. But the Su-85 is just holding position for now, and we have a little bit of a stalemate going on. No one really wants to push into the centre, maybe even wait for the blizzard to go. But I think the Germans may want to push up here with their Panzer IVs. They may see that these Panzer IVs are very useful here. I wouldn't go it alone, but they're going to blitz right round here and see if they could do some damage against this Su-85. The Su-85's not moved yet, and this could be the worst thing for the Su-85. The fact that it's been pushed round, and the Russians may say, that's it, it's over. I can't deal with this Panzer IV, and it's over. I can't see the Russians getting anywhere with this. They've got very little on the field anymore. They've got infantry units, some of them are down to half health, and the Germans have the tanks. They've got 2 Panzer IVs, they've got massive amounts of infantry, and in all honesty, I wouldn't have been surprised if he GD'd there, and he did. So the Germans did a very good job there, because the Russians had them for the first half of the battle. The Russians were really good at pushing up, using their early infantry units to come in and the scout car to take some of these stars. But the overall force that the Germans then used to push them back was quite well utilised. They kind of put the pressure on this middle section. They didn't really worry too much about the southern and north sectors so much. They really wanted to get hold of these points, and they kept pushing these points. And when they brought their first Panzer IV into play, that did turn the tide, I think, for the Russians, because the Russians had nothing against it until they brought their Su-85 out. And when the German used their blitz ability there against that Su-85, in all honesty, even though the Russians have the points lead, as I said before, the points really don't matter to begin with. It's literally a time reference, the points. So it tells you how much time you can use to build up an army to try and take back the points and really force the enemy, like the Germans did, to surrender, because they've got nothing left. So, what were the main turning points in the game? Well, as I said, the Panzer IV did a really good job. But before that, the infantry units, the Grenadiers and the Panzer Grenadiers, as you can see, they're really well veteranced here. The 2 Grenadier units are very well. They've got 2 points each. The Panzer Grenadier units got 2 points. One of the other Panzer Grenadiers got another point of veterancy. And those veterancies and those infantry have done a really good job of pushing back the enemy infantry, the shock troops and the conscripts. I'm surprised we didn't see rifles. I'd have personally wanted to see rifles from Vivisektor to deal with some of those infantry, but unfortunately he chose the route of incendiary and artillery and flame, basically, would be the best way to describe the doctrine that they used. And although it was effective in some of the areas, the Germans got round that incendiary devices and won the day.